Well, good morning, everyone. We have a few people still joining in. We're getting a little bit of a late start here, but that's okay. Welcome to AIEC Webinar Weeks. Thanks for joining us today. Today's topic for this session will be Backup Best Practices presented by Vista IT Group. This presentation will last roughly about 45 minutes. We'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. If you have any questions, please submit those to us through the chat feature. Make sure you drop down and select AIEC in the drop down. We'll moderate those questions and present those to the folks over at Vista. Please keep your microphone muted unless asked otherwise. And if there's any questions about PE credits, Brian, what do they need to do to earn those PE credits?
I think for the most part, I have everybody down that is a PE and getting PE credits. But if you have not already done so, shoot me an email. Just let me know so I can keep track of those. My email is badams@aiec.coop. So just shoot me an email so I can make sure to be watching for your name that you're registered and logged into the Zoom call. And so then I'll send out a big certificate at the end to make sure you get all your credits. And with that, I'm going to introduce Jeff Stevens. Jeff is the president and CEO of Vista IT Group and has over 26 years of technology experience in the commercial space. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Jeff.
Well, thanks for the introduction. I wrote that myself, so it's kind of hard to hear somebody else talk about me in the third person, I guess. But thanks for the platform, you guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the partnership. My part is very, very brief. Just want to get an overview of not just the presenters, but also our company's go-to-market in some areas I think we can help the co-op. We've got a long-standing relationship, and I don't know if people have been on the webinar in the past, but I've been worked for this company for going on a quarter of a century now, and one of my original relationships was CADP, so I did have some exposure to this whole co-op when I was in my 20s. Just didn't know how big you guys are and the geographic reach you guys had. So it's good to get reacquainted. And Dan, I certainly appreciate you being an advocate and a partner of ours, I guess, in this whole journey that we're down together. So thank you very much. You guys able to see the presentation okay?
We can, yes. Thank you, Jeff.
All right, great. And just, I guess, set the stage for the perfect storm. This is what I love about trying to be functional and productive in the COVID world. Leading up to this, we had Comcast issues, internet issues, and then there's always all these connectivity issues as you're trying to do, I guess, value-based conversations in a geographic spread with big files and a lot of bandwidth. But in front of here are the presenters. Mitch is going to be talking about more of the backup best practices, explain, I guess, how it is we can help, what you may want to look at internally in terms of how your organization manages backup as part of an overall security posture. Rob's going to set the stage a little bit in terms of leading up to that presentation, in terms of just some higher level, we'll call it the basics, right? So we don't want to, offend anybody's technical acumen in this particular room, but we don't know, I guess, what it is you don't know and where you're going to find value. So start a little bit generic and kind of move more to the meat and the potatoes. So Rob, are you steering this from the next screen, or who's doing the driving? Oh, Mitchell is. Okay, good. This is a little marketing slide. This kind of talks a little bit about our purpose and our journey, and being in the technology space for 30 years, we certainly get to see a lot. We get to do a lot. And that helps us help customers get in front of issues just because we experience a lot of things. We can bring best practices, mind share and market share to people who might not have been experienced. Some of the things we have just because of the customers and some of the technologies we touch every single day. Let's move on. Here's one of my favorite slides, just the compilation of a 30-year-old technology company and the journey we've been on, from mainframes, VAX and alpha architecture, which I actually used to provide CADP back in the day. So that's where I got my start in the old mainframe business. If you're not familiar with Vista, we rebranded ourselves back in 2015. We used to be Great Lakes Computer. We've got some personal relationships. Jason Priestley has done some work with us. So just some real good case studies in terms of some of the unique features and capabilities we have as an organization. Moved around to different facilities, and that warehouse picture you see in the bottom right is one of those great infrastructure relationships that this co-op can enjoy, just because the proximity of the infrastructure we have, and it represents a lot of different manufacturers, components, and different assets that allow you to really have flexibility in terms of how it is you buy, what you buy, and what generation or even what condition, because we do have a lot of refurbished products here too. And our company actually got that start in the space just because of the cost and expense of mainframe architecture in the day. A lot of customers just look to the affordability of the aftermarket products, and we never kind of lost sight of that. So let's move along. Here's our people. Right next to the Vista logo, you'll see Mitchell and his Lederhosen. And, that's one of the, I guess, the fun things about our organization. We're fun, we're young, we've been around for a long time, but we do enjoy each other's company. That's just one of those things we promote in terms of our culture. One of the things I'm most proud of is our tenure wall. You got to work for the organization at least 5 years to be on it. And this wall right now that you're seeing only represents half of the organization because of the growth we've gone through. But the people on this wall represent over 320 years of combined technology experience. It's just hard to find that kind of tenure and that type of technology expertise and that well-rounded exposure to a lot of different technology under one roof. And that's one of the things I think is unique about us. Okay. Core competencies, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I just like simplifying the slide because there's a lot in there, but it's basically the things we're good at and the high level categories in terms of data center, supply chain, technology services. Within that is programmatic or competency offerings that really help, round out what customers come to us for. We've got thousands of customers all over the country, and they engage us and define us in different ways depending on their business model, our relationship with them, and their knowledge of all the other things we can do that maybe currently we're not today. So you ever have a question about what we can do? We're certainly not masters of all, but we've got a lot of expertise to where we're able to do a lot of things. So if you ever have a question, if we have the expertise, we have the capability, just ask us and we'll be honest and transparent if it's just not in our wheelhouse. Okay. A little bit about some of the manufacturers. This is, I guess, no names you guys have not seen before. Chances are, in some respect, everybody runs a lot of this in their environment, but the purpose of this slide is to show the investments we make in expertise, not just internally, but in maintaining manufacturer relationships that have a lot of technical and certification requirements to maintain a relationship in the partner ecosystem. So a lot of work just to remain technical, remain viable, and remain relevant as technology moves at a continuing accelerated clip. This is a neat thing. I think we got a couple of customers out in the co-op that actually are starting to leverage this in an increasing way in our managed services offering. Our managed services portfolio falls under our technical services core competency. And what's unique about our managed services offering, instead of this one size fits all approach to where it's our package that'll fit into your business, we can take your business and fit it into our offerings and be very flexible in terms of a layered approach to managed services. For example, we've got a couple of customers in the co-op that are actually just using us for backup as a service. And that's what Mitch is going to talk about a little bit in terms of our offering as part of that old backup best practices strategy. So very flexible, engage us in areas where you'd like to, hold on to the expertise of the part of IT that you have, your arms around. Next slide. Get past this one, don't clip it, but just an example of why partner with Vista. A lot of things we've already talked about just in terms of our capabilities, but that left side of the slide is a pretty powerful thing for this organization to leverage. Every Friday I get an inventory report and we sit on about $6 million of inventory. And part of that is the price you're going to pay and also the lead time you're going to get from us, because I'm not beholden to a manufacturer to deliver a server to one of you, right? Most of the time we grab it from our inventory, we bring it to technical, we integrate it, and we can ship it out in 24 to 48 hours just because of the relationships we have and because of the inventory we carry. And I believe my part is done. That one go. Oh, a little switcheroo. So thank you guys for the platform. Thanks for the partnership. Thanks for listening. I'm going to turn this over to Rob. He does have some of the largest hands in the technical services area that I've ever seen, but that makes him good at working on stuff. So here you go, Rob.
Easy, Jeffrey. Okay, good afternoon. Let's keep this moving, Mitchell. So one of the things that we try and do for our customers is provide a little bit of education. We feel that our customers, generally speaking, fall into kind of one of three different categories. And this can be with anything. It can be backup, it can be with your security posture, it can be with kind of the health of the infrastructure, any number of things. We do run across folks that are somewhat unprepared. They don't really have a great security posture, and their kind of knowledge of the security risk is relatively low. Quick story, we had a recent customer that had domain controllers from 2000 not running any antivirus. Their username or their password for their domain controller was the same as the host name for their domain controller. I could kind of go on and on and on, and they really didn't have any idea that they were having some issues. We threw some antivirus on there for them, and we literally are containing new files and executables on a weekly basis as these things are kind of popping up for them. So it was a little eye-opening for them. We find a lot of customers are kind of in the middle. You know enough to be scared, but you don't necessarily know enough to pull yourself across the line into the final kind of column on the right-hand side, where security and backup and disaster recovery and business continuity most certainly are, I'd say, potentially scary or intimidating things, but with enough information, you can start to address some of those things and sleep a little better at night. So we feel it's kind of our goal to not only kind of tell you what's out there, but also kind of educate you on some solutions that might be able to improve your security posture, disaster recovery, business continuity, whatever you want. Go ahead. So why you need a disaster recovery plan? When we look at what we would consider a disaster, let's say, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I believe is very different than what we're seeing today. The likelihood, I mean, in general, the likelihood of a disaster like a flood or a fire or tornado or something that's going to bring down the entire infrastructure where we got to fire things back up, those things do happen, but they by far these days are not as likely as things like cybercrime, hackers, malware. Human errors is probably one of the biggest ones up there. So when we look at it, we're not only planning today for what happens if a tornado plows through our data center, what happens if we have a cybersecurity incident and we employ someone to do incident response, and all of a sudden for the next 6 weeks we can't touch our production infrastructure because there's forensic analysis going on, which is a very real thing. So a couple of things to take into consideration when we talk about disaster recovery and business continuity. So the one thing that we do want to talk about, it's related a little, but we feel that not a lot of our customers are aware of what their current insurance policy for the business may cover. As we were going through this a while ago and kind of getting our ducks in a row before we started doing more of this for our customers, we found out that our policy did not cover any cybersecurity incidents. Covered if there was a sprinkler going off in the data center, covered if there was a tornado. It explicitly excluded any coverage for a cybersecurity incident. So that's not only like business interruption insurance, but also the remediation. So we'd encourage everybody to have a conversation with your agent, your carrier, whoever it might be, and start asking some questions. There are a few hoops that generally speaking you need to jump through. Again, we would be more than happy to have a conversation and kind of talk about what our journey was and some of the things that we had to do to satisfy our carrier so that we could get some pretty healthy coverage. So a couple of the basics, and again, as I mentioned, kind of the cybersecurity incident is becoming more and more prevalent, and our customers are needing to enact their disaster recovery and business continuity plans more often for cybersecurity incidents than an actual kind of disaster, a natural disaster. So we thought it would be appropriate to talk about what are some of the basics that you can do for either little or no cost to really prevent some of those things from happening. Good password policies. If you look at some of the statistics and the reports out there, password hijacking and password compromises are some of the biggest entry points for malware and bad actors to get into our environment. So doing things like creating passphrases, integrate Active Directory into anything, looking at multi-factor authentication or things like login, are things that really help get in front of some of those potential issues. Making sure that your Windows, and not only Windows, but also some of our other systems, Linux specifically, making sure those are all up to date. This includes firmware on the out-of-band management interfaces, because there are always vulnerabilities that are found. So keeping these things up to date and patched is another good thing. And then also, as a last line of defense, making sure that you've got your arms around how are you backing up, how are you recovering, going through and making sure that you are testing your recoveries, whether it's just trying to bring a file back or actually running your environment in a sandbox to make sure that your ERP, databases, everything else can come up using your backup platform. So again, a couple of the basics. Mitchell, let's go ahead and move on. Oh, I guess it's Mitchell's turn, so we'll go ahead and do the old switcheroo. I'll go ahead and mute.
Sustain it as laptop.
Yeah, I'm running it from here. So. All right, we should be good here. So hello everyone, this is Mitchell, and as the intro stated, I'm a pre-sales engineer here at Vista. I'm kind of, the guy in charge of kind of managing the backup services here that we provide at Vista. I'm just going to start off by kind of giving some best practices or recommendations in a little bit of delineating between a few different strategies, and then finally how Vista can help with that. So first of all, we're just going to kind of start with the 3-2-1 rule, which is would fall in line with the best practice. That's basically just having 3 copies of your data. So one's going to be production, one's going to be a backup of that production data, and then one's going to be a copy of that backup. And then that's going to be on 2 different types of media. So usually the first one is going to be disk. The secondary media is going to be something like a tape, a NAS device, or secondary disk. There's a lot of different options there. And then the one comes into play with having that one copy being off-site for disaster recovery purposes. And when we look at backup strategies, some people tend to get some misconceptions kind of about what it actually is or what they actually are. One of those is really the difference between backup and high availability. Really just think of backup as kind of a recovery as you need it. So, corrupt system, upgrades went wrong, something went wrong, you need to fix for it right now. And when you look at high availability, that's more along the lines of you're eliminating those single points of failure. So, there's redundancy in your infrastructure, which is, really important, and it may oftentimes reduce the number of times you actually need to recover from backups. But it's definitely not the same as backup itself. Another one I'm going to talk about too real quick is just backup versus archive. Really, archive is it's a type of backup, but generally speaking, when you look at archive, it's more of that longer term retention. Maybe it's just a just in case scenario, or oftentimes there's like regulatory requirements that kind of drive the need for archival data. But yeah, just generally a lot longer retention times on them. But when you look at actual primary backup, again, that's just kind of, when you need it, something went wrong and we need a fix for it right now. You might need to recover soon and often, sort of thing. And Rob, or I forget if it was Rob or Jeff, they kind of alluded to this earlier, but with business continuity and disaster recovery, they're so tightly intertwined with backups, and they're very important to talk about, very important strategies to have in place. But they do have some differences, which I just want to quick go over. And I could really go far down the path of what each is and why they're important, but that could be a whole presentation in and of itself. But just from a kind of a general perspective, think of business continuity more as a proactive approach. So there's things you put in place kind of in your environment that will ensure your business can continue operating during a disruptive event. So, the question being, how do we keep the business running when a disaster strikes? A DR plan, or disaster recovery, on the other hand, that would be more in line with kind of those specific steps that you have to take that you've laid out. that you are going to take as a company if a disaster does strike. So it's a little more reactive, but that doesn't mean you can't plan for it. It's very important to plan for it, in fact. So the question there is, now how do we recover from a disaster that it's already happened? So from here, just kind of cover a bit of what Veeam Backup Replication is, which I'm sure most of you have heard of this product before, but this is kind of what we use for our managed backup option here at Vista. It's a pretty comprehensive data protection and disaster recovery solution, and we actually use it internally as well. There's a slide earlier that said we eat our own dog food. This is something we wouldn't go recommending things to customers if we didn't have firsthand experience with it. But and it's really catered towards those higher virtualized environments, but it definitely works just fine for physical workloads as well. And there's actually some pretty cool built-in technologies into Veeam that it really helps optimize the storage usage and resource consumption. So when those storage costs start getting pretty high up there, you get the most bang for your buck with what you're doing with Veeam. So I'm just gonna quick to give an overview of some of the features. And if at any point down the road you want to go more into this, feel free to reach out to Vista here, and I'd be more than happy to hop on the phone. But just real quick, there's backup. Obviously that primary backup of your production data. So if we go back to the 3-2-1 rule, that would be copy number 2, and so that's that's just a backup you have on site then. And then moving over the backup copy, what we're going to talk more about in a second, that's a copy of that backup, which is a copy of your production data. And that's going to be again, like I said, from the 3-2-1 rule, is going to be preferably an offsite repository. Moving over to replication, from a high level, it's pretty straightforward. It's just a copy of a VM that you store on a spare host. It's just kept in sync with that original VM. And that's basically what replication is in a nutshell there. And one of the really cool parts of Veeam too, and I'll go a little more into detail here, is Sure Backup. And what that is, and I'll back up just a second here, no pun intended, but just as important as successful backups is successful recoverability. So if you can't really recover from your backups, what's the point of having them in the first place? So Sure Backup kind of helps test recovery. You can run through DR scenarios. It carves out a bit of your infrastructure and uses that completely separate from your production network to test recoverability of applications, VMs, stuff like that. So that's a really cool thing that Veeam has built in that is very important to take advantage of. And then it's all managed from the same easy to use single pane of glass window. So customers just tend to love that. We love it. It's just very straightforward and easy to use as well. So I'll get into, again, I said I was going to talk a little bit more about the backup copy portion. So how Vista can help you with that, something called Cloud Connect. So we are a Veeam Cloud Connect partner, and it's pretty cool is kind of what you can do. So from a high level, it just, you create those backup copy jobs, you add Vista as a cloud provider into your Veeam infrastructure, and then you can choose the Vista repository as a place for your backup copies to go. So it works pretty darn well. You can choose your retention policies. So how many recovery points you want, how often those recovery points are defined, etc. And one thing I'll note here too is we also offer 1 week of offline tape backup for free. So that just runs once a week, overwrites the previous week. It's just nice to have that kind of offline copy of the data just in case something were to happen to your disk backups or something were to happen to Vista, etc. It's just nice to kind of have that peace of mind that you have something offline ready to go if you need it. Another thing I'll mention too is you can really get your data back from us in a pretty short amount of time compared to other cloud providers. So And the reason that we can do that is just kind of how we handle the sending the data back. So if you look at like the AWS's and Azure's, that's just going to take way more time to get your data back than what Vista can provide. It's also a pretty flexible licensing model. So, you know, if you already have Veeam, or maybe you want to buy it and still use Vista as a Cloud Connect service provider, that's totally awesome. You can do that if you already own it. You just have to pay a small per VM fee on top of you know, what your licensing is, and then you're good to go from there. And then there's also a rental option as well, which that's a pretty popular option we've noticed, because that small per VM fee that I mentioned is kind of wrapped up into that rental licensing. So it just looks at, hey, how many VMs do you got? This is how much it is per VM, and then you're off to the races from there. And then for the actual seeding of the data, so you might be thinking, okay, you know, say I'll just use an easy number. Say I have 10 terabytes of data. You know, how do I get all that over to Vista? We have a couple options for kind of seeding that data. So, you know, if you do have a lot, like 10 terabytes, 20 terabytes, whatever, we usually recommend kind of initially backing up to an encrypted disk enclosure that we send you. Then, you know, you send it back to us, we make the transfer for it over to our cloud repository here. But the other option is over the WAN. So, you know, it can take a bit more time, but it is definitely, you know, quite a bit easier just to set up and click run, and things are off and going. So, and then just kind of the last part, there's obviously the storage part as well. So, you know, you're sending data here, and that starts at just $25 a terabyte a month. And from what we've heard and what we've seen in the landscape, that's a pretty darn competitive price. So, you know, you'd be pretty hard stretched to, you know, find much cheaper prices than that anywhere else. So, I don't know if there was something, yeah, so I think this one might have been, or should have been previously, but one thing that we're gonna be doing here as well is the kind of a free 30-day trial here. So, you know, say you have a few VMs you wanna, you know, test it out with, see how it works, you know, we'll let you do that for up to 30 days for free. If you don't like it, then cool, we'll, you know, flip the switch off. If you do, then you kind of have a good starting point for moving forward from there. But that's about all I got. I'll kind of hand it back over to Jeff here. He'll have to unmute, and we'll take questions at the end here.
All right. I think we've orchestrated this relatively well for having last minute technical issues. Thank you, Mitchell. Thank you, Rob. Maybe one thing to kind of touch on, this is not my area of expertise, but what I do know in a lot of our customer relationships, there's one thing that people hate to do, and all transparency don't do a very good job of, is backup, right? Because it's kind of like your insurance policy. How often you take out your insurance policy and read it? You only pull it out when you're getting pulled over or when you're in the middle of an accident, right? So part of what we always recommend to our customers is doing what we'll call tabletop exercise, and you're probably familiar with that, but it's basically a mock drill. So if you're not going through tabletop exercise in terms of business continuity, business interruption, you should be. And it should be probably a quarterly exercise as an organization, and something you can kind of make a bit of a war game or a drill out of through that tabletop exercise. And if you're not testing your backups to make sure that the data you're actually backing up is actually valid, not corrupted, that's something you should be doing at least quarterly as well. And depending on our technical team, we might even recommend the amount of data and what you're backing up in terms of sensitivity of it, that you go through these exercises a little bit more frequently. So let's talk about next steps, and then we'll turn over to questions, because I think we're still doing really good on time. What's our next slide? Is that it? Okay, yeah, so we're gonna send out a link to everybody, just to kind of keep, I guess, maybe the conversations moving along. If you want to talk to us, there's a link that's going to be sent out to the group that basically talks about our cybersecurity score. And there's 12 questions you can kind of rate to 0 to 5. And really what it does is it gives you and us an opportunity to collaborate on more targeted conversations. Depending on your ranking, I guess your area of exposure, so to speak, where you want to improve your security posture, this 12-step questionnaire really gives us a pretty good idea where we should focus our conversations. As an incentive to get you to complete that, everybody who completes one's going to get a grab bag full of Vista cheap swag, but there's actually a pretty cool t-shirt in there for you. But just filled with stuff that we've kind of been collecting throughout the year. But somebody will win a $100 Amazon gift card that submits the little cybersecurity score, and we'll announce the winner to everybody tomorrow. So I don't know if there was, oh, it was Joe too. Joe, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about an example in terms of where it is that we were able to help you guys, or is that the time of the presentation when we kind of pull you in as a good case study of all the good things that Vista is able to do for you?
Sure, I can. So I've been working with Vista for, gosh, it's been probably 12 to 15 years ago. I was with a previous organization in the healthcare world, and we were looking for a physical machine to match a couple of other virtual hosts that we had. And Vista actually ended up having a large inventory of just about everything we were looking for on the shelf, which turned out to be kind of convenient, but the cost was just an order of magnitude lower than we were looking for, looking at all of the other objects we were looking at. So we actually ended up going with them, and we purchased over the years a lot of items from them. And then a few years ago, as Cornbelt was looking at virtualizing our environment, I was looking at some rather large machines, 48 cores, 192 gig of RAM, many terabytes of local drive space for a project we were doing with that. And we were able to get those machines identified. I'm one of those guys who, if the 2020 model is out, I'm perfectly fine taking the 2019 with 0 miles for a few thousand less. And that sort of sums up kind of the way we have been working with Vista. I was able to get the machines identified. Their folks were able to assemble them, test them, update all the physical firmware and the physical servers. And I was planning to actually, since it was kind of an exotic environment that I was trying to run, to verify that it actually worked as I wanted it to before we purchased and installed it. So I just took one of our vans up to Grand Rapids, spent about 4 or 5 hours in their shop, loaded up everything, tested it, ran all the speed tests against the physical hardware for drive speed and read write and IOPS, and got exactly what I was looking for, cut a purchase order, threw them in the van and left. And it was just a wonderful experience. So I appreciate that, guys, very much.
Well, that pretty much wraps it all up for me. Great, Joe. I really appreciate the feedback, and there's nothing better in terms of story to tell when it comes from somebody else about us. So I really appreciate that in terms of relationship as well. Oh yeah, Mitch did send out a link to everybody in the chat with the link to the landing page that has that cybersecurity score. So are we at the point now where we're turning it over for Q&A if there is any? I think we're on the next slide is probably thanks and maybe questions, I think, right? Yeah, there we go. Anybody have any questions for the group?
Yeah, real quick, this is Kevin Jackson. I'm the senior account manager with Vista here. Just wanted to thank everybody, before we get to questions, just want to thank everybody for taking a second and attending. I've had a chance to work with a couple of the guys from the different co-ops in the AIEC, and I've had some good success, and I look forward to hearing from more of you guys. Definitely just don't hesitate to reach out. There's a lot of different things we can do, and just looking forward to it. So any questions, that'd be great.
Thanks, Kevin.
We have had a couple questions come in, so I will pose those for you guys to answer. And you may have already touched on some of these, but maybe as a quick refresher. First question, why do AWS and Azure take weeks compared to how quick Vista can do a restore?
What's that one?
All right, once. All right, sorry about that. We have two computers close to each other, so there's a little bit of feedback. But I think the question was that here. Let me throw this back on. So the question was basically how do or why do AWS and Azure take long or weeks compared to days for Vista? So we actually kind of have a customer case here for that, but really it just comes down to AWS and Azure go over the WAN. So with Vista, you get a little more personalized attention, and this customer use case actually was they had an outage, or they actually had a ransomware attack, and so they needed recovery fast. And because of that, and they were, I think, like 2.5, 3 hours away, we actually we did a reverse of that backup copy seed, and we loaded the backups back onto that drive enclosure, and then the account manager whose account it was drove it over across the state on a Saturday, and they were up and run, or they had that recovery back in like, I think it was like 36 hours or something. So just different possibilities like that that Vista can provide, you know, when you look at those other cloud providers.
Thank you for that answer. Another question came in. If I'm performing a backup, will the backup data size be the same as what the raw data size was before the backup happened?
Sorry, do you want to repeat that real quick?
Yeah, sure. If I'm performing a backup, will the backup data size be the same as what the raw data size was before the backup happened?
Sure. So there's actually a bit of, so with Veeam, like I'd mentioned on one of the previous slides, they do have some of that data reduction built into it. So, you know, when you look at, you know, think of like compression, deduplication, things of that nature, that will happen during the process. So, you know, if you're like, oh man, I got to back up, you know, 10 terabytes, blah, 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 it might only be, you know, 4, 5, or 6 that are actually hitting the repository. So that lower amount is actually what you're billed on, not the initial raw data.
All right, one other question came in. How do we recover data from Vista's cloud?
Sure. So really there's, I mean, just the recovery process in general is pretty straightforward. And it helps a little bit to envision if you've seen or used Veeam before, but again, it's super easy to see, you know, once you do get in front of it. But you'll see your VMs listed out. You'll see you'll see your backup jobs, what repositories are on, what VMs are in each job. And you'll just go to it and say, you know, hey, this VM, you know, we'll just say it's our, you know, DNS server, whatever. That has a recovery point of 3 days ago in that Vista Cloud repository. You'll just right click it, say, boom, we need to recover now. You'll choose what point in time you want to recover from. There will be some different steps to do, like if you want to have it be offline, or if you want it to change networking, or, you know, there's various options there. Then you just hit recover and it'll go through its steps on the back end, and you'll see that VM come across and get restored where you want it to. And just to that point too, real quick, sorry, you can recover over the WAN. So, I mean, that's kind of what makes all this possible, right? Because normally you're doing recoveries, if you're doing it from your primary backups, you know, that's just kind of within your own infrastructure, but, you know, you can recover over the WAN as well. So you can recover right from the Vista Cloud repository there as well.
All right, thank you for those answers. We do have a couple more minutes. If there's any other questions from the group, feel free to forward those on to us and we can read them. You know, we'll give them a couple of minutes to do that. I mean, if you guys wouldn't mind providing maybe your contact information if anybody's interested in reaching out to you, or they can reach out to us and we can forward that information on. But feel free to you know, give your email addresses in case any of them have any questions or anything.
Sure, sounds good. We'll probably just we can shoot you an email right after this with, you know, all 3 of our Kevins too, you know, whoever you want to know that information about. Well, we can send that info over after this, and you can just shoot it off to whoever was attending today.
I went ahead and added a note in the chat too. So if anybody wants to reach out, you can, my email's right there as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Kevin. I'm not seeing any other questions, so unless you guys have anything else, I do want to do a quick plug for our next webinar. It is broadband, things that surprised us with Vantage Point. That's going to be at 1 o'clock today. So if you've not already registered, feel free to register. Registration will close an hour before. So if you don't make that deadline, reach out to Ashley and she'll get you the link for that, that call. With that, I want to thank you guys for taking the time out and presenting to us, and hopefully it was beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, thank you as well. Thanks for giving us the chance to talk about that today.
Thanks, Dan. We really appreciate it. And thanks for joining, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks guys. Have a good day.
All right, you too.
Bye.